We're weaving our way through Launceston, heading over to Scottsdale now. We've said farewell to the vets, the reunion's over. We're going back on our exploration of places less travelled.
After 600 metres of the roundabout, take the second exit.
Between Launceston and Scottsdale, and we've stopped off at Sidelink Lookout. It's a bit misty, but you can see there's quite a sweeping view from here. Between Scottsdale and Derby now, lovely green paddocks, lots of mountains. We're going up and down a few. For a drive out to Legerwood, which is a little village between Scottsdale and Derby. And they had a whole lot of trees in their local park. Each tree was planted to the memory of a fallen digger. When the trees grew so big and old and rangy that they became dangerous, rather than just chop them down and root them out, they decided to create carvings of the trees. Very clever. These trees were planted on the 15th of October 1918 to honour our fallen heroes who gave their lives in the 1418 conflict. Chainsaw carved by Eddie Freeman, 2004. This one depicts a bugler, lone pine crossing flags. Man and his dog. At a free camp on the western edge of the little town of Derby, beside the Ringarooma River. We're back home after a little bit of a tour around. Set up camp, about to have our cup of tea. I was entertained for ages watching this bumblebee go about its business in this beautiful rhododendron. We're going to explore the Tin Dragon Interpretation Centre at Derby, once a very profitable tin mining town. Full of very interesting displays, but the most moving part for me was seeing the video presentation of the collapse of the Cascade Dam.
On the 3rd of April, Derby recorded 7 inches of rain. The following day there was a deluge of over 12 inches. The dam had failed. 3 billion litres of water exploded through the gap, devastating everything in its path. Workers doing repairs on the race scrambled for safety. Hector McCormick and Gordon Good never stood a chance. Hurtling down a bend in the valley, the torrent swallowed a small group of houses just above the town. Mrs. Inverarity was standing on the veranda when she saw the approaching boiling cauldron of water, trees and boulders.
A huge wave crashed against the Whiting's place. I think they had all just sat down for dinner. I hear their screams. I will never forget it. It was just an awful scene.
Seconds later, Mrs. Inverarity was running for her life as the torrent engulfed her home. Her neighbour, Mrs. Waters, and her 4 young children heard the roar and rushed out of their house into the seething waters. The eldest boy, Jack, escaped over the back fence. With her baby in her arms, Mrs. McWatters and her young son Bill clung to a tree. Her baby was snatched from her arms by the violent surge and then, miraculously, got caught in a blackberry bush and survived. Young Nellie, aged 10, taken by the torrent and never seen again.
Rising stables were carried away like a matchbox. The men working in the stables never had a home. Mrs. Brodley and Mrs. Richardson were standing on the hill and saw their husbands washed away. The screams of the women and the children were terrible.
Mrs. Wall watched through her kitchen window as desperate miners clambered to higher ground. Then the wall of water was surrounding her house. She managed to escape just as the current swept it off its foundations and carried it upstream, smoke still puffing eerily from the chimney. In no time at all, the mine filled with water. Over the next 5 hours, Police Constable William Taylor risked his life, ferrying the miners one at a time to safety in a small boat. So huge was the volume of water that day, it devoured the Ringarooma, turning 2 rivers into one and flowing upstream. The surge continued on for another 8 kilometers where it flooded the township of Branxholm, causing damage, but thankfully no further loss of life. Next morning, in Derby, the toll was counted. 14 souls were lost, lives were broken, livelihoods were destroyed. The conquering dry seas had been no match for nature's unbridled fury, obliterating 50,000 tons of rock and concrete in an instant. The Cascade Valley below the dam was scoured clean. The river reclaimed its ancient course over the Cascade Lead. Where the mine offices once stood, there was now only naked granite. The valley and its people changed forever.
Main Street of Derby. We've set up camp looking over Sloop Reef and the Bay of Fires now. Very nice spot, great view from the lounge room. Just come down to sit on the little beach and rocks below our camp. Come for a drive round to North Cozy Corner. This is near Swim Cart Lagoon on the Bay of Fires. This is called Swim Cart Lagoon. I've come for a drive around to a spot called the Gardens. The sun's not shining on our parade today, so we're not getting the lovely deep orangey reds, but still spectacular in its own grey way. I'm across an old Aboriginal midden here. You can see all the layers and layers and layers of shells, evidence of ash of a fire, and possibly the dead remains of the trunk of the tree they sat under as they ate their feast. The Aborigines who feasted at this midden obviously did very well on abalones and oysters, mussels. This would be a lovely place to have a shack, wouldn't it? A couple of boats tied up over there and the house behind. This is the bully of the pack. He's gone and thieved stuff from the other birds. No wonder he's big. We've moved from the coast, a whole 30 k's or so inland, to Pyrena, to the pub in the paddock, and we have the most beautiful rural views. Also not very far to walk to the pub. That's the pub, and this is what we're looking out on. Sunny, green paddocks, blue skies, and all the way down into that beautiful valley. We popped into the pub where we were served by the lovely Rowena and enjoyed a meal there before returning back to camp. Sitting in my seat in our van at the paddock where the pub is in Pyrena, walking down to St Columbia Falls. It's reputedly the highest falls in Tassie. Looking across to Mount Victoria. We've just driven through all the Mount Victoria forestry, coming up from the pub in the paddock. We're up to about 810 metres. It's building a cairn to celebrate our rise to the thin air. Not much of a cairn, not as big as Sturt's cairn.
It's a can.
It's a cairn just the same, yes. You can see Mount Victoria in the middle at the back. I've come all the way down from up there and we're going down into the Ringarooma Valley. There's a paddock full of cows in the middle background, all making milk. This is the beginning of the old tin mining tunnel at Derby. That's looking back out the tunnel. That's someone's interpretation of a rainbow trout overlooking the village of Derby. This is what they call the big hole at Derby. It was created originally as an open cut mine when they were mining for tin. Just up the road from our pub in the paddock, we've got the Holy Cow Cafe cheese tasting room. I just didn't have the right kind of beer. Couldn't entice her.
Grass. Throw it over. What's your name?
Here's the KK in the paddock, near the pub in the paddock, and also near the pig in the paddock that loves a beer.